Okay, so in this video, I want to kind of pull everything together that we've talked about with HTML and CSS to talk about how like a fairly simple web page was designed. So this was a website that I created for my cats, and I want to just kind of step through the different components and how they were generated. So again, the goal is to take everything we've looked at before and kind of pull it all together. Okay, so before we get into looking at the website, let's just look at the structure of the folder that it exists within. So here's my folder. So it's in this web development example folder. So inside of here I have this image folder, which has a bunch of images that I'm using on the site. I have this source folder, which actually doesn't have anything in it because there's no JavaScript or anything being used on the page. And then I've got 3 HTML files here. So there's the main page, which is this index.html. That's the page that we're currently on. And then I have a separate page for each of the cats. And then this JavaScript file actually doesn't have anything in it because at this point there's no functional JavaScript being applied to it. However, we do have this styles.css where we have applied our styles. Okay, so let's take a look at this drop page first. Let me get rid of this here. All right, so again, we're initiating. We have an HTML file, English language. In the header here, we've specified the character set. We've specified the initial scale of the viewport, which is just 1. We've created a title, so that's what shows up here in the tab. And we're linking to the JavaScript file, which we're not actually using, so that could get deleted. But if I did add JavaScript, I could link to it there. And I am using the CSS, as you can see, so this is linking to the CSS file. If I were to delete that, then we just have the website without any styling applied to it. Okay, cool. All right, so that's all of the head. Okay, and then the body, we basically have a main body div. Inside of there, we have a nav bar, which is the nav bar there. And basically that nav bar was created as an unordered list. And then we have this first div, which has some paragraph text in it, and also has this image. And we see here there's an ID applied to these which affect the styling, which we'll talk about. And then we've got a break here after that div. And then we've got the 3 images, and then another break, and then this last set of text here. Okay, let's open up the page here, just look at our inspector so we can kind of see all of the different parts of the page. Okay, cool. All right, so there's the head, there's the body. All right, so again, the body basically has this main div, and you can see that basically holds everything other than the outer margin. And that's because I wanted this wallpaper effect behind it. So there's this main body, and then there's this main div inside the body. So the body actually has, let me go ahead and open up the styles here. I've applied this image file, which is this wallpaper background. And then, so that only applies around the margins. I then define this dot main body, which is a div that holds all the rest of the page content, and I've set this this color to be the background color. So hopefully that kind of makes sense how that works. Let me see if I can actually split these. There we go. We'll do that. Okay, cool. Let's have a look at the nav bar. So you can see here that the nav bar, we have a nav class, and then we have actually no styles are applied to the list elements. So let's find that. So .nav. So here we go. So .nav. So you can see here I set the list style type to none. So that's why we don't have any bullets. Overflow to hidden. And then the nav list, I have it float left. That's why they're not centered. They're float to the left. And then I've specified some styling for the links here. So I have the text color. I've specified that they're a block. So that's what's allowing them to display horizontally instead of vertically. So on and so forth, right? No text declarations. That gets rid of the underscores, right? We also have this pseudo selector here for the list A hover, which changes the background color when we hover over each of them. So it's a pretty simple nav bar, but it's basically accomplished using an unordered list and then some CSS for special styles when you're hovering over it. Then styles for the list element. The key thing there, it really is this block display. And then the nav, the main thing here is we're getting rid of this. We're setting the line style type to none, so we don't get any bullets. So that goes back to what we talked about in our CSS chapter, so hopefully that should make sense. Okay, and then I've got this top div. So if we go down to that, that's the nav, and then all the content in the nav, and then there's the top div. So that's this area here. And then we have our break, and then we have our cutouts, and then we have this last div that has this content in it. Let's see how we're getting things to go to be side by side instead of everything being stacked. Okay, so this top div, we have this object all three, which is this image, and then we have the main title, and then we have the paragraph stuff. So the main thing here is how did this end up over there? So that actually should have got accomplished using float. So we set this float right, so that floats to the right of all this content. So that's effectively doing that. Later on, when we look at Bootstrap, we'll talk about how you can basically accomplish the same thing using the grid system, which is how I generally prefer to do it. So hopefully that should make sense. If we look at the cutouts here, so they have these names. Oh, sorry, that's not, actually that is right. So we have cutouts and the names. So the margin auto and text align center is what's centering the content in that div. And then the cutout images, we're putting a bit of a padding around them. And these breaks are the horizontal rules, and they're basically just getting styled, so we're not letting anything float to the right of them. That's what clears this issue here, so this image can't float to the right of this. And we're setting it 3 pixels wide with a certain color, and it's only going to be 80% of the page width. And then the dot names, let's have a look at that. So the dot names is what gets applied to the images here. And the main thing that this is doing is allowing these images to be displayed as inline and centered. And then they also have this text associated with them. Cool. Okay, and then if we go to the other pages, so I'm just going to go over here and navigate to one of the other pages. So similar setup, we've got the same nav bar. We've got some text, a list, and then we've got some images that are centered on the page. Note here that because it's not wide enough, it's going on to 2 lines. That's probably not great. That probably should get fixed, but it's okay for our example. So again, this is a pretty similar setup. Again, same setup for the page. We're linking to the same style sheet. The nav bar is the same. The main thing here is, again, we're just specifying some different styling and whatnot. So, for example, this cutout image Freddy, which is this image here, if we go down here, we can see it got float right. That's why it's floating to the right. And then all these other images are these exam images, and they're set margin auto text align center. And those occur in, so sorry, that's this div. So that basically is centering all the content in the div, and that's it, basically it. So we have the content centered in a div using margin auto and text align center. And if we go to our other pages, let's go ahead and collapse this. That same thing is basically getting applied so that we have stuff kind of centered and whatnot. Okay. So anyway, I hope you can see that, a website is, basically is making use of a lot of the stuff we've already talked about. It's a lot of tags, CSS, and then if you want to do stuff that's a little bit more fancy, then maybe you can incorporate some Bootstrap. And again, if you want to do functionality, you might have to do some JavaScript. But you can make a pretty decent looking website with just some basic HTML and CSS. Another note, if you go to a website that you like, let me just go to the West Virginia View website real quick. You can see the page source by just clicking and going to view page source. So if you see something on a page and you're not sure how they did it, you could always look at the page source and see if you can figure it out. Okay, so that was just a quick example of just looking at a website that was just base HTML and CSS. Now we're ready to move on and look at some Bootstrap.